right. Things worked out even though it didn't go as planned, and that happens sometimes. It's part of life. Sometimes it takes some getting used to. And for some people in the communities that have delays, it's hard for them, and we have to understand that. Today we're going to be discussing something that we all, as parents, caretakers, um, individuals who support those who are all of those things, deal with. Sometimes unintentionally, sometimes we even do it to our mates, and friends, just in the community of caring for and loving each other. And that is how they say we teach each other how to treat each other. And there is also a term in the teaching community that is, we say, each one teach one. Many of us are so concerned with what other people think that we are unaware of what we're putting out or what other people are receiving on how we communicate with our body language, how we communicate when we receive what we think is their perspective on what they're seeing. Particularly, we're more sensitive than we're honest about. So we all have these ideas and opinions on other people's lives without understanding we don't know the entire story of what someone else is experiencing. And as parents, sometimes we're triggered. We think that others are thinking we're doing a bad job, somehow we're missing something, so we tense up. Our children start behaving in a way in which we feel other people are looking on and think we're doing a bad job. So we parent from their perspective or what we think that they're seeing, and it's the bad job that we're doing. We allow ourselves to be embarrassed from someone else's vantage point, when oftentimes they may just be observing because of what they're dealing with, and they're trying to get a different perspective on how they're doing. But sometimes that may come across as being mean to our children, bullying them, or treating them in a manner in which it appears that they have less intellect than they do. So what happens is, so that we don't get embarrassed, we take over. We don't allow them to process. Some people take longer to do things and handle certain situations because they're trying to understand from what they're looking at how to handle it in a way that, one, will satisfy you, and two, will work for them. A lot of us are still dealing with the trauma from our own childhood, from our parents and caretakers, whether they be an aunt, uncle, grandparent, babysitter, whoever, because of other people deciding to handle us based on what someone else said or thought, or what those people just thought they thought. They didn't actually even think that. They didn't ask them questions, and they allowed them to be involved in their mind and situation without even communicating with them clearly, without trying to make sure that what we knew. And we wore that tag forever from one or two instances. We have one particular instance that made me stop going outside because we had a neighbor who, because of her age and past experiences, even though she had a pretty good experiences with my grandmother, seemingly the other ones that she had, because we were children and she had gotten older. Her name was Miss Cooley. She has passed away now. But because of her her own personal upbringing, different things would cause us to get physical correction, and we hadn't actually done anything. There's one particular incident. We were outside, we were playing, we were in my grandmother's yard, and we were picking what we thought was grass on my grandmother's side of the fence because we were kids. We decided to play house, which meant we were trying to make dinner. It had rained a few days before, maybe the night before, but anyway, it was dry out now at that point. So we had gotten some mud. We had some bottle caps. We was making us some mud pies. Okay. And then we had gotten some grass on what we thought was grass on that side of the fence. She called my grandmother on the phone and said to her that we had stolen her onions. Now, what had happened was they had grown up on my grandmother's side of the fence, but they weren't mature. They looked like strands of grass. They were still in the point of maturing. So my grandmother called us in immediately on her word, rather than look outside or clearly ask us questions. What she did, what she knew to do, which they had done in the past, which was anybody said somebody you said your children did something, they did it. Yeah, you didn't have a defense. Um, so those of us that were involved, we hadn't really done anything. She beat us mercilessly. Was it intentional? No, she's trying to save us from going to the penitentiary. Um, in her mind. In our mind, we hadn't done anything, and yet we were going to be punished for it. It was at that point I decided that I was going to continue to be punished always because of other people unintentionally getting in themselves into something. We weren't bad kids. My grandmother wasn't a bad grandmother, but we were operating in what other people thought. Now, I'll say the other lady grew up how she grew up because she was not someone of our persuasion, our nationality. So, in her mind, she was raised to believe that all people of my nationality, skin color, were thieves, even though we were small children and there was nothing we were doing with her food. Clearly, we were playing. We did take it in the house of my grandmother. So, one would have concluded that there was no bad intentions, but from her perspective, it was. In her mind, we were brown thieves. And so that was an experience based on the perspective of others and no one assessing who we are. Had they ever had any experiences with us like that? Why would we do that? No questions were asked. Do we do that to our children? All the time. It's important to try to break the cycle of knowing who your children are and taking the time to ask them questions that, one, don't seem like you're interrogating them. Two, trying to assess what was happening. Three, don't stigmatize your children, even with the possibility of them having delays and things that they may be working on. Something that made it happen that was clearly an understanding. And even if it was something that happened just as you thought and knew it happened, does this need to be done publicly? Does this need to be done now? Is this something you could correct in a loving manner without trying to make your child the villain? Trying to make them feel like they constantly have to prove to you that they're not what other people think that they are. A lot of times, as our children grow up, the reason they withdraw from us or start rebelling from us is because they no longer trust us because we're so busy trying to impress the people that aren't a part of your day to day life and won't be affected by what you decide to do to your kids. They won't be the ones that are constantly having heart palpitations and waking up at night worrying about what you think. Because I saw something on Facebook the other day that really gave me a different understanding of so many things. And as a parent, but it hit me because it was something that I realized about myself without realizing it absolutely applies to our kids. And that is how you treat your children won't make them decide to love you less, no matter what you do to them, but it will make them love themselves less. It will contribute to them being in bad relationships, bad friendships, being on a job and being bullied and abused by their bosses. There are people who have killed themselves because of their job. They hurt themselves because of other adults that did not know how to walk away from. They didn't understand how to handle a situation where they were able to get out of it without losing what they thought was their integrity. And some people are fearful of, if I lose this job, no matter what someone else is doing to them while they're on that job, they will consider themselves a failure in their financial situation, whether this job is overwhelming to them and it's too much, they're not doing well at it. Sometimes we don't even give ourselves permission to leave something that we don't enjoy anymore. Lots of people wouldn't be in bad jobs, bad friendships, bad relationships, bad marriages if when we realized we no longer enjoyed this and this was no longer okay, that our boundaries weren't being accepted, or you didn't understand how to accept the fact that you weren't happy and to set boundaries. And in the event that, hey, they clearly don't know understand this, so I don't need to be in this. Being on a job, just being beat up as an adult because you're afraid that if you leave it, you will no longer have financial stability. Rather than realizing there are other things out there, there are other jobs out there. There are other friendships out there. There are other relationships out there. You have the right to move forward, to progress, to improve. And someone else is relying on you has nothing to do with you. If you can't do this, you can't do this. You shouldn't go crazy or be sucked into situations where you're constantly having meltdowns because no one gave you permission to be treated well. And we made it where our children were okay with being bullied. That happens at school. Sometimes because of the fact of how we treat them in front of their teachers, we don't assign them respect, so their teachers don't. And that gets passed along in the classroom, and now the students are watching. Sometimes unintentionally, the instructors, because of how your parents treated you in front of them, did this, and others grabbed onto it. They thought, oh, this is an example of what needs to be done and what's acceptable. Everything we do is an example or what we want, accept, allow. I want you to say that again to yourself. Everything you allow or do, even if it's based on what you think other people think, is an example to others of what we want, accept, allow. Be mindful of how you communicate with others about the loved ones that are around you, because everything you do is an example of how things are supposed to be done. So when you set those examples, this is what you're going to get, because this is what you're giving out. It happens with your children in school with bullying because of that one time they did not defend themselves, or they didn't say, I don't accept this. I don't know why you're having a hard time, but I won't allow you to give me one. This is what we're going to do to handle this. Every conversation doesn't have to be one where you're telling someone you want to fight them. Meet me outside. No. Having the conversation of what you accept, what you allow, and you are allowed to ask questions. Allow your children to defend themselves, because we're raising them to be adults. If you help them all the time now, you train them that it's okay to receive your help, but you also have to help them to understand what's tolerable, what's acceptable. And here's something that's big: helping them to understand what's even acceptable from you. The relationship you have with your child will change because they're growing up. They're not supposed to stay children. And that's hard for parents. The other conversation that a lot of people are going to possibly get upset about is they're not supposed to be under us forever. All that they can do, allow them to do. Helping them all the time is a great thing, but that's not the same thing as doing it for them. It's not the same thing as constantly having them rely on you. Helping them is preparing them to take care of themselves as much as they can later. That means mentally and emotionally. That means also you being accountable, me being accountable for what we do. If your friends deserve an apology, they deserve one. They deserve someone to treat them like they're important, because we don't want them to hold on to deciding that they're going to take anything to have friendship, that they'll take anything for approval. Because the only person's approval we need two. We need our Heavenly Father's approval, and we need our own. That's it. Those are the two. And I wanted to say that again. You need your Heavenly Father's approval, and you need your own. If you have your Heavenly Father's approval, you should be in a relationship with your Heavenly Father. That will guide you in every part of your life. It will guide you on how you treat others. It will guide you on how you allow yourself to be treated. It will allow you to understand how you should conduct yourself. And how you conduct yourself determines how other people decide how they're going to treat you. You will have an air about you when you will take that liberty as to whether or not they will try to mistreat you. The people that are generally bullied and abused are people who've been given the message that they are not worthy, usually unintentionally. Remember that your children were your personal gift from our Heavenly Father, yours, not someone else's. And that gift that was given to you was given to you to respect, to treat well, to love, to protect. Some people beat their gifts up and tear them up and play with the box. Don't do that to your children. Because who gave us that gift is paying attention to how we take care of that gift. Because we are accountable to Him, even if we don't realize it. Take the time to love each other, respect each other, consider each other. Don't let someone else tell you how to take care of what was given to you. It's your job to protect it. You can't give it to everyone, even if they insist that they would do a good job taking care of it, particularly when you watch them destroy their own. Have a great night. Love each other. I hope to see you again next week with a special agenda. Okay?